Hi, my name is Julia Carlisle. I'm an interpretive ranger here at Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller National Historical Park. I have the opportunity today to interview the park's chief horticulturalist, Kim Murray, by my side here, who's been with the park since its inception. He has a lot of stories to tell. He's also worked with the Rockefeller family in the past and has a long, experienced career in the business. Kim.
Hi, my name is Kim Murray, as Julia said. Yes, I've had quite a glorified history here at the park, but I'd like to start by saying that I've been in horticulture since I was 3 years old. Believe it or not, my grandmother used to plant this huge garden every year, a victory garden at the time, and the whole family was involved in it because we all kind of shared in the responsibility of helping her plant it and whatnot. And each of us children had a little area of the garden to plant seeds of our own. And I just happened to put in some squash that year, and one of them, when it was time to harvest it, it looked just like a resting duck. And so we took this resting duck summer squash to the local newspaper, and by God, I got on the front page at 3 years old, and with my little squash duck. And the caption below it said, "What a garden he'll grow someday." And since 65 years later, I'm still growing a garden. So that was my inspiration, which, don't ask me, I can't remember any of it. But from then on, it's been digging in the dirt. And at one time, my wife and I started a small landscape business, and we thought that it would be nice to use the slogan as "Hire me, I've been digging in the dirt since 3." But it didn't really take off very well. But it ended up just being a little sideline business of gardening, and my wife and I are still doing a little bit of it today.
And that kind of expanded and led to your connection, if I understand it correctly, to the Woodstock Inn?
Well, yes, I decided that I wanted to go, after high school, I wanted to finish some more education, and I kind of was leaning towards forestry. And so I put an application in University of New Hampshire, and I got a letter back from them that said, "I'm sorry, Kim, but we don't feel that you have enough math background for forestry, but maybe you might be interested in another field." So I actually drove down to Durham and talked to them and said, I'd really wanted to go to university, and I wanted to do something with forestry, but I understand I'd have to take some other courses, but is there anything else related that I could do? And they said, well, you could talk to Mr. Kennedy down at the Thompson School of Applied Science and get into his horticultural program. So I had an intro, so I went down to see Mr. Kennedy, which is a very nice man. He was very interesting to talk to. He was, during World War II, he was hired to help with camouflage for the U.S. government, doing camouflage because of his plant knowledge when different troops in different areas of the world. And of course I had to tell him that, not everybody can grow a duck from a seed. And he was pretty interested in that. And so the next thing I know, I was signed up, and that September I was going to the University of New Hampshire in a horticultural program. And I actually lived in university housing. I was responsible for taking care of 3 greenhouses out of the 7 that we had for a place to live, and I even stayed there an extra summer after I graduated and took care of some of the greenhouses. And then from there, part of being at the university, you had to work in your field for a summer job related to horticulture. So I worked for a nursery one summer, and then I stayed on for a few more years after that, down in Durham, Portsmouth area. And then eventually I moved north to Claremont, and eventually it was working with Skyline Garden Center, who was the contractor for Mr. Rockefeller. He was the sole landscape contractor under the direction of Brian Lynch, who was Mr. Rockefeller's horticulturalist and landscape architect. And we did a lot of the foundation plantings around here back in the late 70s. We spent a lot of time planting white pine trees in the front. Actually, I'll take that back because I wasn't involved in the white pine planting, which we have one left here at the park, and it was planted here when it was planted, the height of it was 52 feet tall, and it was brought up from Muscatney, Vermont, and it was quite an impressive thing. I've seen pictures of it. I just happened to come working for Skyline about a couple of years after that was done.
Is the white pine in front of the mansion,
Right.
is that the one?
That's the last one, yes. There was a number of them, because apparently the story behind that is at one time Mr. Rockefeller and Mrs. Rockefeller were taking Route 4 west coming to the mansion, and it was after foliage had fallen, and the sunlight must have hit the mansion just right, because it was just stuck right out. And Mr. Rockefeller said, well, I'd like to see that building toned down a little bit. It really it just strikes you, and that's the only thing you see. And so that's when they decided to start planting some pine trees around it. I think there was probably, I'm not exactly sure, but there was at least 5 to 7 pine trees that were planted, and that was the only one that's left.
And then you told me a story about getting involved with work at the Woodstock Inn.
Right.
And you had a little story about some of the trees out front and Mr. Rockefeller, and that led to some of the first trees you planted here on what is now the park grounds.
Right. Apparently at one time there was, Brian Lynch designed the whole Woodstock Inn landscape, and he actually, I'm pretty sure he got an award for that landscape design. And in that landscape design, in the mall in front of the Woodstock Inn, there was 5 yellowwood trees and 2 pin oaks. And apparently, of course, like plants will do and trees will do, they grow. And Mr. Rockefeller was coming by the front of the Woodstock Inn, and at that particular time, the yellowwoods had gotten so big, it actually, it obstructed the view from Route 4 to the inn. You couldn't see the inn. It was getting sort of hidden by these trees. So at the time, there was a new driveway put in coming up from, which we use now, coming up along the carriage barn, and it was thought that maybe those yellowwoods would be nice to line that tree. So we were hired to dig those yellowwoods up, and we had to keep them to like 5-foot root balls, because Woodstock Inn didn't want to take the fence down. So we actually had to dig these trees and keep the limitations of the root balls, which weighed tons, and roll them all out on planks and rollers out to the street, and then load them onto a truck and bring them up here and plant them. And there is one existing one left. What has happened is they've succumbed to disease and have died, but we've had one of the original ones, and we've replaced in kind. So we're growing another batch of yellowwood.
And I thought it was interesting that you told me it wasn't a case of Mr. Rockefeller saying chop down the trees and get rid of them.
No, he loved trees. He loved trees, and he loved a nice green lawn. Yeah, he would go to great extents. There's the story about the oak snag that's up here by the waterfall gardens, with the big, huge oak, probably a 200-year-old oak, had died, and he really didn't want to even cut that down. He actually had Bartlett at the time cut it in such a way to make a sculpture out of it, and it was there up until about 10 years ago, and finally she fell over. But as long as I can remember, there was this oak tree with these big limbs that were strategically cut in different areas to make like a sculpture.